So what we do in FF3 is the crypto that you bring onto the site in order to trade for tokens in the projects is USDC. So it's pegged to the US dollar.
Right.
So,
that's the big question. I was going, how the hell do you get that money to make the, because to make the production, you got to take it out and pay wages.
In the room, 52 Jokers Wild.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. This week, in the room with 52 Jokers Wild is Phil McKenzie, who is into finance, production, and ventures in entertainment. He is also the COO of Goldfinch, where he helps in sourcing funds for film, television, and video games productions. Thanks for joining us, Phil.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. One of the things I'm interested in is, very briefly, is I was looking at your LinkedIn, and we've been interviewing loads of women talking about their experience in the film industry. So I just thought, it'd be interesting just to start off with a little bit about your organization is getting into funding women and giving a women's voice. What's that about?
Yeah, I mean, it's so my business partner and the CEO, Kirsty, is obviously a woman. I am not, and so it's something that obviously naturally kind of, it's something we want to support, and we've always been mindful of supporting from the start of setting the company up. Is how can we bring more access and opportunities to female filmmakers, because certainly 8 and a bit years ago when we started, it was far worse than it is now. I mean, we've still got a hell of a lot of making up to do, but it's slightly better, and it's slightly more on the agenda. Well, it's definitely more on the agenda, which is good. But how we, in the past, it's just been from us talking and networking and building those more connections with female filmmakers. But we've been doing something in the last couple of years in First Flight, which is a business we run with Nick Sadler, where we essentially run like an incubator for emerging filmmakers, and we run a quarterly short film fund that finances the top 2 or 3 entries into it every quarter. Okay. And we normally get around 500 entries. Really fantastic submissions, and a great way of just building a fantastic network of young filmmakers and ideas that they come to us with, and hopefully we help them on the road or taking those first few steps, either literally through funding that short or through just a bit of advice and guidance and mentorship as well. So it's quite light touch, but it's fantastic, and we're in touch with some amazing people through it. And more recently, we thought, how can we take that up a gear, and build on a great sort of couple of years we've had running that. And we sort of came back to, why don't we focus in on female voices and running a sort of short film fund round, but focused on female filmmakers. And so that's kind of probably what we've seen quite a bit of press about in the last month, is us launching that with some great ambassadors as well from the industry. We did a great webinar last week, I think it was last Tuesday, where all the ambassadors, all the women were talking about the challenges they faced, how they sort of, got round them, overcome them, and and where they saw the industry going, and how people could help, really, and again, putting it on the agenda and talking about it.
Yeah, I've been in the industry nearly 40 years now, and I know that quite often I've been working with lots of women colleagues, and that's always been part of the agenda, to try and promote women and give them a voice and help them along. What are women talking about now as being the stumbling blocks that they're? I know we've been talking to women, but they all seem to be having the same problems that we're having as men. Yeah.
I don't think it's changed really. That the problems are still the same, which is quite which is a failing on everyone's behalf, that we haven't managed to improve it or find the solutions yet. I think the biggest thing. I mean, again, I'm only speaking from what I remember and the bits that I picked up, but the biggest thing is just the sort of work-life balance, which is far more difficult for women, and particularly mothers, to handle in an industry where hours are long, the work is is very much freelance and quite lumpy in terms of when you can take it. I mean, obviously we've had a great kind of 12 months in terms of, crews are very busy and there's been hopefully a lot of work for people who maybe had a bit of a lull from COVID. But broadly speaking, it's those issues, and also and also getting into those more senior management roles and decision-making roles in the industry as well. I think there's a lot of that, and again, these are just assumptions and my own views, but I think there are a lot of women that are coming through as filmmakers and creatives, but it's how do we progress them into not just doing their first film, but their second and their third and their fourth film, and how do we progress them into being business owners and people that are running, they don't have to be running Viacom or the BBC. They can be running their own production company or distribution company. And from doing that, I think the other things that we're trying to drive in terms of more female storytelling and stuff through the female, from a female point of view, will trickle down anyway, because you've got more female decision makers involved in the process and at different levels in the process. And I think that's the additional challenge, is how do we do that? And I think that's a challenge across all filmmakers, isn't it?
Actually, I can't believe, and like George is probably in shock that I've actually sat here and listened to the professionalism, and I didn't butt in, and I didn't try and make fun of it. But I mean, the great thing is you're mirroring or reflecting exactly what we're hearing in Ireland and England. And actually, the people that George was talking about, the last 20 women we were speaking to, were more these are the women of the future. They're the future. They're exactly that little trifecta of. They're writer, producer, directors. But in order to be that, they're becoming all three. In order that they're writing it, to direct it, to produce it. There might be a short. The great thing you mentioned there was you were helping to fund a little bit of that. What we're seeing out, the question and the answer normally are nearly around this. If you're not getting a job in the industry, which is one thing, and you want to be the industry and bring new stories out there and be in charge of the production or the director or the producer, then the biggest stumbling block is raising finance for indie production, because it's not going to be the macro production. It's going to be that one that's your testimonial to yourself that I can do this, I can do it bigger. And enough of what we're hearing, it's the bit that might be missing sometimes is we know they've got a good story. We know they can do the job. We know the teams are there, but there is a little bit of a lack. I'm an accountant going, where's the customer? How are you getting there? How are you going to get paid back? The raising the finance is one type of finance, but that investor wants a return, it's that. I think there's an awful lot of difficulty, and a further difficulty than there's ever been before, because we're witnessing, whether it was pre-COVID nearly, of an exit of the investor from indie production, because it's very, very hard to see how you're going to get paid. And that brings me back to what attracted me to yourself, maybe on their first flights, was there is money out there. It's how to maybe engage with this new, more risk averse or less risk averse money, possibly. Yeah.
Well, there's what you just said, I agree with, and there's a few things maybe to kind of unpack on it. But the first bit is getting funding to do something for the first time, whatever the industry, is incredibly difficult. That's it. And there are, there's some good bodies out there in terms of institutions, soft money sources. There's people like, us in First Flights, that are helping, somewhat benevolently and somewhat, commercially, because we want to keep a relationship that continues with these fantastic filmmakers, to take that first step. But it's still very hard, and let's not kid ourselves. And we need more people investing early stage into productions. But this kind of comes onto a bigger point, which I think you're getting at, Garvin, which is there needs to be a better investment landscape and sort of environment to help push more money.
You just remind me what you said. Sorry, in the last sentence, I'm sorry. I'm probably about 3 minutes behind you. I'm probably the time lag or something. But you touched on First Flights again. It was the language I'm starting to remember now is what we really do need, this language of incubation centers for business production, like micro business productions, and wrap that word business into it, as opposed to production on its own. It's a business. It needs to be a business. It needs to attract investors. It has customers are going to pay. They're going. We want them to see it and get to the end audience, but we got to turn things on its head and prove that audience is there.
And there's the two bits to it, which is the people, the whole industry is incentivized around individual productions and getting that first production out, do your first production and that's it. And then there's not as much support around, well, how are you creating like a brand or a vision for your production company, or how are you pulling in the different elements that you need to build off what could be a great first film, but how do you then take that forward? And then linked to that is what I was kind of touching on before, is that the investment environment is lacking in the UK to bring individuals, private investors in to support, particularly film, a little bit TV as well, indie companies, homegrown indie companies. There just isn't a financial. SCS and EIS worked, but that's no longer kind of appropriate. So it's trying to find how do we, and also there's just this big hangover and headache from film schemes of old that if you go out there and try and market a film investment and add in the word tax, then you're going to be everyone runs the hills.
Runs for the hills. That's it. So the whole film about that one.
We're seeing lots of filmmakers who are basically going out every weekend filming, and I'm sitting there kind of going, "How are you going to edit those? How are you going to edit those projects? You're turning out loads and loads and loads and loads of stuff, but they're not actually getting time to package those things because they're not thinking, I think, of the financial implication of that, of how to actually organize those kind of structures. And then they're not thinking about how they market them to go off somewhere else, because they're just saying, well, we don't think about money, because if you don't think about money, or if you thought about money all the time, you wouldn't make them. We're kind of going, but that's the wrong way to think about it, because you're not funding yourself to survive while you're actually doing these things.
Actually, Phil, the one thing, again, I'm just jumping on little words in there and go, you touched on what isn't there. And it isn't there, and it needs to be there. And you're already starting to do with First Flights. We've got to create methodologies that weren't there before, and not try and get into this soft money legacy institution. Because if you get a 900, you touched on it in your own sentence of your own support. 500 were in the queue, 3 we supported. 497 went back and got lost and they don't know where to go next. The 3 you're definitely helping, but we're finding those queues are large everywhere we go, and those people are finding it difficult to be the future storytellers of tomorrow, because if you don't get it right first time, they're not going to get that investor back a second time. Oh, did we drop?
Yeah. No.
So what's coming out of my own mind there is it'd be nice to have an incubation center pool of a catalog of people that they're not going to be measured upon it. The one item failed, you don't get it again. They're part of the talent pool that is somehow being incubated, and what comes out of that is a catalog of something. No, I don't know what that is. I'm just making it up on the fly. What's good there is it's the same in every country. There's talent that's out there. It's trying to queue up. It's trying to find finance, trying to get a route to market. And it's just, there's not a shortage of talent. There's just, it's queuing. We've touched on this on a number of our shows. That talent has to join queues. It doesn't want to join because there's bits missing that enable its talent to be materialized under all the headings of story, production, camera, you name it. It needs to be the end-to-end business so they can plan and produce and distribute.
And I think the filmmakers need some kind of training. They know how to make the movies, they know how to write stories, they know how to do all the practical bits and pieces that you've talked about in the past, but they don't have the understanding of how to knit things together so that they make the packages to get them to where they need to go to find an audience. So there's an area there, I think, that they need to try and understand.
Actually, that's the language that Phil was just touching on. It's that how do we need to create an incubation hub that can incubate that talent and help it and join the bits, that because each individual is looking for the other parts, and it keeps on searching for the other parts. There's lots of new talent hubs out there. That's the language of Screen Skills Ireland is now, and Screen Ireland is using. They're creating talent hubs, but that's more for the big macros to pick the talent and plug it into the big macro production and go, I need 3 cameramen, I need two sound boom operators. But the creativity talent hub needs to be incubated and see that egg grow into its child and into an adult, version of itself, and then keep on doing more. It can't just have a crack the egg open, fry it. It has one life. No, it needs to be, it needs to have a full life and can do a lot more afterwards.
And that's that again. It's that part of that planning process. I mean, everybody can plan a schedule for a film, plan whatever the scripting, but they need to plan for what happens next. And I know what a lot of filmmakers, I suffer the same problem, that would end up putting so much effort into making it but at the end of it, because they're so exhausted, they haven't got the energies to try and push it through to reach the audience, which is really where the journey starts. And they've actually lost all their energies. They've misfired and misjudged where they need to. Yeah, we have been hearing from some of those people who have got their stuff into film festivals, the energy that they need to do to get that, like Baz, he's putting so much energy into that side of it, that he's actually getting those rewards now because people are recognizing him as a filmmaker that's started to be of note.
I'm reminded of the more the term and the name, the title, as opposed to what the story was about, but the never-ending story. And what it is the story doesn't end at any point there. It's a different chapter. I've made the film. Now I have to market it. Now I have to distribute it. Now I have to sell it. Actually, the next 20 years, I'm hoping to get a royalty income in from it. I'm actually going to use it to brand myself to get the next one to do it again. It cannot be a story with an end. It needs to be the never-ending story, but you need to keep on reading and get as passionate about every single chapter as the first. I actually paired the whole film production people to embryo chickens. So they have to be incubated, grown, and go out there with a couple of cockerels, and hopefully they can make more, and that sort of thing. I'm going to put this back up while you two talk.
Yeah, which is it links to a number of things that worth kind of thinking about as well. A bigger picture at the moment where we're in the process of opening or getting all the sort of plans signed off on opening studio space in the northeast of England, up in Newcastle. And one of the big things we've sort of been banging the drum about is creating exactly that, is a kind of incubation ecosystem there, not just a studio that we rent to Netflix for, on a long lease, and we make money off it, and that's it.
Sorry, Phil, I'm going to jump in. Sorry for interrupting, because we're on a time schedule here. Did you? You've just changed the subject to one of our favorite subjects at the moment, and everybody's favorite subject: studio space. In Ireland and England, in England, I can see they're building studios like they're going out of fashion. Now, the gas thing is the demand is there for them. And actually, you didn't want to mention that dirty word tax break, but you're turning that square foot or virtual square foot into the highest square foot rent, because that's what it's a big shed that's renting a tax break effectively to foreign production. And in Ireland, it's worth a lot more. And before, we've had a bunch of conversations with like Screen Ireland and the Galway Film Fleadh. Annie Juna would have been the ex-chairwoman of Screen Ireland. And what is lacking in Ireland is these big studios. I've seen a couple of new plannings go in lately, but they're still not what it's meant to be. They're nearly stuck in this legacy space of building where space allows and in between cities where stuff went before, where actually what we're evidencing is it needs to be a massive studio. It needs to be plugged into green carbon emissions. It needs to be, it needs to be future-proofed, because we're seeing blue screen grease. It needs to be connected to an airport. And because what it is that thing there needs to be big, and then it can attract because as soon as you plug it in, that capacity is going to be gone to Netflix and Amazon based on their current planning. So
wasn't there? There's also a story.
It depends on the model you want to work.
There was also a story where in one of the areas in Ireland, they hadn't actually thought about schools, and they hadn't thought about the infrastructure that's needed to support the big studios, because they were just putting sheds up, but there was nowhere for anybody to go and live.
Yeah.
So that was something that came out.
No,
Sorry, Phil,
I went around the circles there. I was actually trying to I didn't even come up with a bloody question. But no, what you were saying was, if I was an accountant, I would be advising you to go, your return on that studio is actually much more attractive in Ireland than in England. Because talent will move. But what's now on your break-even point, you've probably got a 35 to 37%, 32 to 37% tax break in Ireland, versus maybe the 20% of 80% of the tax credit in England. So the strange thing is, if it was about money, you'll be getting a better ROI on the capacity demand of that studio space being rented out. Because before this thing started, there was a £600 million queue in the queue before streamers' demand went through the roof. Actually, if you had a better attractive tax break in Ireland, you'd actually have the queue that's trying to get into England move to Ireland based on accountants making decisions. I don't have to get the same return on investment from end viewers.
Now, in the way that things go in that kind of model there, because of the potential of tax break, if they keep building more studios, will the streamers then just soak that up as well? And will there still not the opportunity for the up-and-coming filmmakers to be developed?
Well, that's the thing I think people are kind of glossing over, and particularly, everyone likes to talk about these big figures, that the BFI kind of promote about, which is great. I mean, don't get me wrong, it keeps our crews busy.
It's money.
It pumps money into our economy. That's all fantastic. I just feel we need to have an eye on our domestic indie content. Industry, which we don't, because we're just in 2 years' time, as you rightly said, Garvin, when someone else comes out with a better tax break with or another country that has an equally rich content creation history and culture and just as good crews, that suddenly undercut us on the tax credit. And everyone starts to up sticks and move somewhere else. It's not going to happen as quickly. This is taking to the extreme. But we're gonna have a hollowed out filmmaking, and potentially even TV sector as well, where we just become service producers.
Yes, exactly.
To all the big boys.
What we are is capacity and bodies. Exactly.
We need to build. Hence our approach with this studio we're setting up and everything else we do in Goldfinch. We need to build. We need to provide the ecosystem, the structure to bring these people and these companies and these projects through, so they stay here, or so they can set up initially, and so they can stay here as well, and they have everything that they need. Whereas at the moment they don't. But all of this kind of links back to the investment thing as well, of saying if there's not money to pump into that in the first place.
And there you go, Phil. Jesus and Brigara, haven't you got that one covered as well with first flights? So we'll get on the first flights now. Myself and Jordan, I don't know if he's a virgin. I know I am. I don't know. Every time I hear the word blockchain or Bitcoin, I'm nearly get itchy. But at the same time, NFT was another couple of acronyms I had to start trying to understand. From what I've seen of yourself and other people, there seems now, without us understanding, because we're novices, there seems to be a journey of indie production could have an avenue in terms of financing through, that's not just crowdfunding, but as I said, it needs to be an investment, but it through this NFT matching to and crypto
potentially
matching. Yeah,
I think like any it's a, on a very basic level, it's an untapped pool of capital.
Yes,
there's depending on what day of the week, what's going on, kind of macroeconomically. There's either sort of 2.5 trillion, 3 trillion, or 2 trillion, locked up in crypto, and that is not only an untapped pool of cash, but also the people that own crypto tend to be quite. They want to support other creative endeavors, and particularly endeavors within the Web3 crypto space as well. So, there's a strong kind of ethos of community, and around, this all comes back to decentralization as well, and about the community supporting one another and the projects that emerge from it. So, So there's also a great sort of vision there as well that should, there's money there. There's a vision that aligns as well potentially with filmmakers and content creators. It's trying to find the kind of ramp into it.
Actually, I was trying to use the word in my mind whereby what I don't like about the crypto and NFT is the intangibility. I believe there's going to be a solar flare now in the next 10 years or something, which will pretty much turn off the electricity and switch it back on again, and all my Bitcoin is gone. But I mean, I'm probably hoarding gold in the corner. But apart from that, there's a certain, what I think that you were mentioning there was, if the intangible can be locked to the tangible in some way, then there's a material art form mapped to the digital art form where there's a real and unreal world tied together.
Well, that's the basis of it. Is that you're through blockchain and particularly through NFTs is a good sort of practical example of taking a blockchain and a token, and you get an NFT. You don't get an NFT, but an NFT is an example of something that could be created. It's indelibly marked. There's a record made of this is who owns this asset, this token, this NFT, and this is who owned it before. And when it's traded or sold, or you can then build things into the smart contract that's linked to the blockchain that mean that the original creator gets a share of that. That there's obviously another chain added onto the blockchain, so you know where it's come from, where it's going to.
No, actually,
because I was talking to Garvin about that earlier on because we're entering this area of deep fake, of everything being faked and not knowing where those sources have come from. And in the news, because of what's going on with the war, they were trying to work out where had this material come from. So they're now talking about using the blockchain and NFTs to be able to track who shot something, who then edited it, who added graphics, and so that all the way down the production line, there's a way of tracing where the origins of this material came from, just so that we can be more secure in knowing that this is reality and not something that's just been generated free.
There's the commercial angle of it, of this technology, which is you can verify your ownership, you can potentially find new source of investment, you can trade trade the NFTs and create more money and other revenue streams. Great, that's fantastic. But there's also something we've been sort of banging the drum about the last few weeks, really, which is actually if you can harness this technology and get your head around it, the possibilities for creation are insane and very innovative. And there's some fantastic people who are really pushing the boundaries on the creation side. And then on the distribution side, yes, there's still those nice things that come with the blockchain and are very important and solve problems about transparency and reporting and flow of funds, which everyone has their challenges with in film and TV. But again, there's some amazing opportunities and potential of what can be done in Web3 with distribution that really just like amp up the audience appeal of it and make it a far more, again, just innovative product. So those two bits that I think will catch up because everyone got excited around the commercials of it and all these projects, popping off and making money off them. But the creative bit is the thing that people will get their head around quickly, and they'll be amazing. The distribution side as well. So, but all together, when you put all those pieces together, you do have either, depending on how you look at it, either or. A lot of the solutions and potential for how we move the challenges we face, especially in the indie side of the industry, move everything forward. Or you have a sort of a parallel industry and ecosystem that can stand on its own.
That's it.
Just before we go, hold fast with what you keep that question in your mind there, Garvin. I just want to quick.
It's gone. My thoughts
Sorry, Phil. You've mentioned Web3 a couple of times. Could you just very quickly give us a synopsis of what Web3 is for those, especially filmmakers that aren't involved in that technology?
So we know what it is. No.
Yeah, we don't know. We have. That's why I'm asking the question.
It's just a sort of catch-all term which covers everything that is kind of blockchain, tokens, crypto, NFTs, smart contracts is within the sort of Web3 world, and that is the idea that we've been through Web 1, we're exiting and have been through Web 2, and we will enter Web 3. And I'll probably get this wrong or not quite accurate, but Web 2, is essentially, us all moving online and the digitization of everything,
right.
and the Internet of things, but that all the power also got consolidated into the hands of basically 3, 4, 5 companies.
Now you do know, I'm going to jump in here now, sorry, because Web3 is the precursor to Terminator, because it's actually where it becomes self-aware. It's already predicting what products you're going to buy. You're already in there. Everything is plugged in. You're connected. And so I think there was some talk in Microsoft.
Probably already knows that my granddaughter, who's only a year and a half, is going to be pregnant by the time she's 20.
We're on the road. I think Web 4 or 5 is that's Terminator land. So that's when we just give up and we go back into the bunkers.
Yeah. But the Web3's decentralization is the key bit of it, which is rather than being 3 companies that do everything and it's all having to go to them, and that they own all our data, and they can guess what we're doing 10 steps ahead of when we do it, is that we empower everyone to be to have ownership and to be part of the decision making process in the future and the funding of what goes on and happens. So that's one of the keys of Web3, is that all this technology can be harnessed, so we can collectively own and create and be part of the future together, which is a fantastic vision to have. I think the challenge is, how do you maintain that whilst the criticism and coming from some places is, are we just doing the same thing again? And do we, as with any sort of egalitarian...
The word there that comes to mind is, it's back to what I'd be thinking, it's like saying, I don't know how to engage with it, to de-risk it enough to engage with it from my own perception. Because if you bought a share, the interesting thing about for the indie side of things, an awful lot of the language you just used was, there's a marketplace whereby if I invested in a small little bit of an indie, I've got in a limited company or something, there's no marketplace. And I'm waiting for royalties from now till doomsday, which may never happen. Whereas here you're saying, there's actually a marketplace from day one, which you could pass on that risk or reward based on the token or the NFT or whatever the language is. There is a new marketplace. But the interesting thing about, let's say you wanted to raise some funds for £1 million for an indie production, is if that's in Ethereum, you get the money 5 seconds later, the thing could be worth 20% less, 40% more. I owe more, I owe less.
Well,
I don't know.
Not necessarily. There's different ways you can do it, and volatility of, as we're seeing in not just crypto, the general economy, volatility is something that unfortunately we all have to, as filmmakers and as citizens, deal with increasingly. And as a filmmaker, previously, if you're shooting across countries, you've got to handle the FX risk and et cetera, et cetera. And if you're taking, as often does, your distributed, your shooting receipts come in dollars, you've got to convert that back. If you're in Ireland, your euros, or UK, your pounds, and et cetera, et cetera. So handling volatility in different currencies, which is all, if you sort of want to be broad brush about it, crypto could be looked at as, it should be something that either a skill set you have to learn or you have learned. There's also a lot of things out there that help, as there are in the general outside of Web3 market. There's things you can do to stabilize and kind of hedge and peg the crypto investment. So what we do in FF3 is the crypto that you bring onto the site in order to trade for tokens in the projects is USDC. So it's pegged to the US dollar.
Right. So, that's the big question. I was going, how the hell do you get that money to make because to make the production, you got to take it out and pay wages.
Yeah. So we take that. So the other side of it is when the filmmaker takes it out of the project raise, they take it out into USDC and then use it as they see fit in whatever kind of currency or location they need to. So there's loads of these are all things that are being worked out as we go along. The environmental concern was one that was really flagged up probably March, at least 9 months ago. Everyone was going bananas about the carbon footprint of minting and mining cryptocurrency and NFTs, but that is largely, it's still a concern, but it's largely been headed off and solutions have been found, and you're seeing all these extra kind of kind of layered solutions coming out that get around and hugely reduce the carbon footprint of everything that's happening. What you have within Web3 is a lot of very, very intelligent people who are, focusing 24/7, like it literally is 24/7 as well, into creating this new paradigm, this new place, and solving all the challenges that kind of come up along the way as well. So
no, actually,
unfortunately, I'm gonna have to bring things to an end here, because I know that you've got to go away for another meeting shortly. So what I need to do is do a little wrap up, and there's so much in what we're talking about here that we could go on for another couple of hours.
This as long as we are here questions.
But it's we've got 5 minutes before Phil has to go, and we need to have an ending. So I need to. So apologies about this, because we are.
No,
excited.
I told you before, Jory,
when
when Phil went during the interview, I started talking about the never-ending story. So there's no end to this. This is the beginning.
That's the thing. But unfortunately, as all practical things happen, and me being a functionary, we have to bring things to a close, and that's the sad thing about this. So we're going to have you back on the show again, Phil.
I'd love to come back. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
well, look, I do a little wrap up here, and we've started off with a women's voice, which I think was really important, the problems that they're actually having, and some of the schemes that you've got set up to try and initiate those people into that. We also got talking about how that setting up some of the film studios and trying to get those things going so that you can have an incubation of new voices in filmmaking. But there are also the downsides that once you open up these possibilities, the financials bring people in, so it could get sucked up by the big boys doing the streaming. It's trying to make sure that there is still that provision going in there. We then got onto the exciting part of the NFTs and how that works, and I mentioned deep fakes at one point, but we got into how some of those things are opening up lots of creativity and potential for new filmmakers, new artists, which I think is really good. And then he gave us a nice synopsis of what the Web3 is. And I liked what was being said there was that because the Web2 is being dominated by 3 or 4 dominant voices, the big boys that are taking things over, there needs to be a restructuring to democratize everything for all of us, so we have at least got an opportunity to get back in there and try to be creative and also generate some income out of it. So that's a little brief wrap up. Just a few more minutes for yourself there, Phil. What any last words you'd like to?
What interview were you in, George? I mean, go. What?
That's what the interview was about.
Very good. You're very good. You got that out of that. Excellent.
Absolutely. Any last words before you have to go, Phil?
No. Well, thank you for having me on. I mean, we just to kind of brief kind of pitch for us as well. Any filmmakers out there, like you're totally right. The bits we touched on today, female voices and first flights, and the short film fund there. That's open at the moment. So please, can people apply and submit their ideas? FF3, which is the crypto crowdfunding side of what we're doing, please, look us up online, join the Discord, join the conversation. One thing we say to people when they're like, how do I learn more? How do I get involved? As I'm sure you two guys are wondering, just jump in. And I mean, I was the same, 18 months ago. I didn't know any of the terminology, or had to download loads of new apps and things to join all the different terms. But just jump in, and everyone is super friendly, and it is really community based. You'll be really surprised about how quickly you can pick stuff up and learn. And then, sort of outside of that, anyone who please, it's always an open door policy at Goldfinch in terms of projects that we're looking to fund. However we can support indie film and TV producers, we want to. And on the production side for us, I suppose, just look out for the things that are coming up on our production slate, which we're really excited about, and the new genre label we launched in number 44, focused on more kind of horror, thriller leaning films and some documentaries we got. So, any way people can support us in return in terms of, following us on social media, and kind of spreading the word about what we're doing is greatly appreciated too.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And Garvin, last couple of words. Okay, that's it.
That's it. No, George, I'm incubating here. That's what's happening. I'm incubating.
That's where the chicken and egg came from earlier on.
Big Bird is going to come out of that egg, and soon enough. So watch out for Big Bird in the future. He's going to be in the metaverse. He's going to be looking for some NFTs, and he's going to be trying to raise finance for indie productions out of England and Ireland with his new friend. Actually, Goldfinch. You're a small bird.
There you go.
I'm a big bird.
It's come full circle.
It's full circle.
It's coming good.
Thanks a lot,
thanks
Phil.
everybody.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks everybody for listening to the show. And remember Goldfinch, if you're looking for potential finance and all that kind of stuff, but just follow them and see what's going on. And maybe you could come back and tell us a little bit as well. Hope you enjoyed the show. It's been a very quick one because we've had to just get things wrapped up. But thanks everybody for listening, and look forward to hearing you next week. Seeing you next week.
Appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, chaps.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications.